Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the return of what we're now calling Forum Albion. Back with me here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the...
That's not a good start. Okay. So yeah, I'm back here with Forking Radio. I apologize for the hiatus. The Forum Albion channel, as you can see, it's lost a number of subs as I've been silent because of a Hangout I did, in which, you know, I lost my streaming abilities for 6 months in total, and then I've just lost it for another 3 months. So I'm ditching that channel now, and we're doing it here. So, King, how have you been?
Good. I've been doing a lot of shit recently. I got into the NHS.
You got into the NHS?
Yes, National Honor Society, not the National Health Service.
Ah, right. Okay.
I've been prepping a lot for standardized tests. Been doing a lot of. I haven't been doing many videos. I've been trying to record a lot, but it's editing that's the real issue because I don't got time to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of bitch work that goes along with making podcasts and stuff. I don't have time for it either.
Yeah, that's why I like the live format and not the pre-recorded format. Because if you make a mistake, then it's not really an issue, or like you have an excuse.
Yeah, no, and it's just a lot easier. No preparation. You sort of develop an organic conversation. You don't have to come up with. You don't have to get sort of a whole bunch of thoughts together, then write them down and work out sort of an order to say them, or it's far easier. It's a lot less of a commitment. It's a lot less preparation. Okay, so we were talking about before we went live something quite interesting. But just for those who don't know, you have been in the sort of new right politics sphere for a number of years. You were about 14, I think, when you first came on the scene. You were an annoying little kid. And really, really annoying little troll, yeah. And there was actually like one point I remember where all of a sudden you were this adult, and you'd come to all of these convictions by yourself, and it just it's remarkable to see the youth these days. I'll probably never publish it. I'll probably make it a long article or something, but I wrote a significant part of a book called "But Mom, I'm Saving the White Race." And it's because of just the sheer volume of youngsters like you who are involved in sort of the new right politics.
Woke 16-year-olds, basically.
Yeah, and you're a sort of neo-reactionary high Tory type. You're a sort of gentry conservatist. I think you're sort of more into republicanism still, or are you? No, you are a monarchist, aren't you?
Not exactly. I've been watching a lot of videos by a YouTuber. His name is Memer's Head. Have you heard of him?
No, I've not. No.
He likes to prescribe to a form of right-wing socialism. I'm not a nat sock. Don't worry about that. But economically, I've moved a bit left. Not too far.
I realized a number of years ago, before I was even red-pilled on sort of genetic stuff or any of that, before I was red-pilled on what I call feedism, I noted that the proposition is protectionism or free trade going to be better for X country. That depends on the businesses in the country. That depends on the economic activity in the country. It's not an inherent thing. And so I sort of like the idea of protectionism. Obviously not. I'm obviously not pro everything being protectionist, but you can make great arguments for protection, particularly things like royal charters and royal seals work quite well in the UK.
Tariffs
have worked historically. Tariffs, yeah, in order to protect particular domestic industries like Welsh steel, and in some cases, if we hadn't have shut down all of the mines under Thatcher, I mean, looking at the price of coal today, we wouldn't have had to have been subsidizing them for very long, would we? And we wouldn't have all of this secondary industry being dissolved, and us going into tertiary industry, more sort of service industry. It sort of seemed to be this. Britain just seems to be this city, that's sort of here for anyone, and the rest of us are just sort of paid to serve them. Yeah, I mean, it's less so in the rural areas, but London in particular is.
The cities in the United States. I really just hate the city. I hate the urbanites. We got to crush them. It can be fun at times, but they're just lefty hellholes. Like, especially in the United States. In London, it got to the point where I heard the crime rate was above that of New York.
Mm.
And New York isn't really that high in terms of crime rate compared to something like Chicago or Detroit or Philadelphia or Los Angeles. Los Angeles, in particular, you have a lot of rich people and a lot of poor homeless people, and you don't have anyone in between. The same thing happens in all the other big cities. You have the rich and the poor, you don't have the middle class, and it's all shit. I hate the city.
Well, my experience is slightly different in that you have a small number of poor people, particularly living in like housing estates on the outskirts of cities, generally speaking. But you have a huge portion of the bourgeois, mercantilist, the middle class, the working middle class, or rather the upper middle class. It's this kind of bourgeois wannabe gentryism, right?
Yeah,
and, I think it's that class which is fundamentally has always been opposed to theism, has always been opposed to sort of new right politics, and I don't think it's necessarily good enough that these people. And, also, even when you red pill these people, they're always more concerned with their own personal, standing. It's like, oh, what will I do if I get outed as some kind of a nationalist, or an ethno-nationalist? I'll never get any work. And it's like, that's the silliest, you do have to think about yourself and your own position and your welfare. But, like, you can't win that. You're just passing on defeat to your descendants if that's all you're doing. And I think this is a trait of the educated middle class, that they vote particularly in their narrow self-interest. And
they can't
and they
vote for
operate.
the interest of children and grandchildren.
They
don't really vote for the interest of their children, their grandchildren, their country.
They do for their children and grandchildren in a very particular sense, or they might look after their inheritance, But
it's all economic, not like demographic or moral.
Yeah, it's sort of it's anything more abstract than that. The educated middle class seem to have no grounding. Money is, or rather, the mercantilist bourgeois middle class. They tend to be, yeah. Okay, so we've covered sort of briefly some class stuff. I mean, you believe in, I assume it is a conclusion that you have come to, that genetic castes are a thing, right? They exist.
Yeah. I got interrupted, so I couldn't really hear what you were talking about.
Oh, okay, never mind. But okay, so like genetic castes exist, and you're sort of more familiar now with population genetic stuff. Because before we went live, we were talking about
race is real. Get the idea.
Yeah, and I remember that things are a lot better these days. But I remember when I first came into these spheres, and people would like talk about haplogroups as if they were like racial groups. There was this huge inflation, but no, obviously they're not. It's merely it's a Y chromosomal similarity.
It's more woke, however, than race doesn't exist.
Well, no, of course it is. Yeah, but it's just bad. It's just wrong genetics, But it must be said, quantitative genetics. There's this general understanding of it, and sort of eugenic practices that people have sort of come to a lot of the basic ideals that we have had historically and traditionally around the ideas of race and caste and regression to like the family bloodline and this sort of thing. So it, you know, it's quite interesting to see. But we were talking about sort of paleoanthropological sort of historical objectives, right?
Yeah. For example, you got like, the Middle East now. It used to be, even up until the post-Muslim conquest, used to be the breadbasket of the world. Like, for example, Rome, Egypt was the most developed province. And like the provinces in like
it wasn't the most developed province.
Economically high.
Technologically a backwater. It was economically high because it produced a lot of grain.
Yeah, well, some of the poorest provinces were like, I think either Pannonia or Gaul. I can't remember which one.
I think, yeah, Pannonia would have been quite poor. Gaul would have been relatively rich. It was considered a very powerful nation. It was considered sort of a great feat that Julius Caesar had. It was considered actually the only threat on the continent were the Gallic tribes.
If they united.
Which they did.
But it was so hastily done that they lost.
Yeah, they united under a guy who was being besieged. And then the Romans had time to sort of set up fortifications. But yeah, so in terms of economic development and productivity, yeah, I mean, these are sort of this is sort of a weird, really quite a strange way to look at it. You know, was Egypt more technologically advanced than, say, Gaul, right? And the answer is not really clear. I mean, Egypt, it doesn't have sort of a history of developing a great road network in the same way that
Rome did,
that the Celts did. The Roman road network across Europe it was built by Celts. It's sort of a misnomer to call it the Roman road network. And of course, the invention of chain mail, you know, which of course was adopted by the Romans precisely because it was better than whatever they were using before.
Plate mail, I think.
Yeah, something like that, or scale mail, I think it might have been. And you know, the gladius and the helmet design for the Roman infantry, you know. But these are just different civilizational types as well.
Yeah, like different economic civilization types. Like, good example.
Different societally, you know. So in Britain, for instance, until you have this sort of politics on the continent, we lived in sort of familial freeholds under the Celtic feudal system, whereby each sept of each tribe, every extended family, had its own little freehold. You know, and if you didn't, then well, you died. You know, and then of course you have the creation of agriculture, the spread of greater agricultural techniques into Europe during the Mesolithic age, and then you begin to see sort of this rapid technological pickup, yeah, in Europe. So, but again, they're still like organic, familial sort of, you know, civilizations. Whereas, you know, Egypt sort of, yeah, I mean, it takes off from the sort of the paternalism of the pharaohs, etc. But it's not anywhere near as cohesive as those tribal kingdoms would have been. The only thing would be organization, of course. But I would expect this from their different traits, you know. So Asians are more you know, conformist the further east you go, the more conformist people are, and people in the Middle East, you know, are sort of along that spectrum,
and especially in China and Japan. Yeah, that's the you know, that's the far end of that spectrum there. And then obviously as you go further south, people are more well, that too, but they're more they're more familial. They're more sort of authoritarian. They're more, you know, likely to be authoritarian. Although you kind of get that with the conformity in, you know, the further east you go as well. They value personal liberty less. You know, all of these traits that we see, all of these sort of societal traits that we see,
can be said to come from their genetics, and any society with those same building blocks can be seen to have similar, or for sort of functional purposes, sort of functionally identical exhibit functionally identical facets.
Yeah. And things change as well genetically. Like, for example, Persia, for a while, it, like, under the Sassanids, the Parthians, and Cyrus, the Achaemenids, was probably more advanced for the time, I think, than Iran of today.
Oh, yeah.
Because, the Arabs came in, introduced their part of the gene pool, and made them slowly become retarded.
I'm less sure about that. I mean, I think the sort of...
Iranian's clearly more smart than Arab, but...
Yeah, clearly. But the IQ of Iran is very, very low. It's
apparently they said Iran, if it weren't due to certain dysgenic practices and interbreeding, would have an IQ of that of China.
Yeah, I disagree. That's so silly. Where did you read that?
Let's see. I found it somewhere. I'm not able to find it at the moment. Lost in my history.
I can't think of any reason that would, suggest that they would have like a sort of an East Asian level IQ. Sort of not far north enough for one. But no, certainly, you have these two sort of prehistoric populations in the Middle East, right? You have the Mediterraneans, and you have the sort of I don't know what to call them. It's the J2 haplogroup. It's sort of how we track them, but they're usually called Southwest Asians, but it means really it's like just squidged in between like Kurdistan and so it would sort of this population in the Paleolithic era would have occupied like modern day Kurdistan and like a good solid chunk of Iran, and this population, you can see it sort of, it's obviously been mixed with like, Semites and things like that to a large degree, to the point where Persians are no longer, the sort of Indo-Persians that you sometimes see. Yeah, I think we don't know whether or not they were Indo-European or not. I think that's
Central Asia used to also be a bit more white than it was now. Now it's like they look almost Chinese, but in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, places like that, they were a mix between Iranians and Slavs.
I don't think that's true.
That is true actually. Central Asia and Bulgaria, Poland, Russia, Central Asia, where it all meets. And I was also looking at a video by a YouTuber. His name's Masa Man. He does videos in ethnic groups. And Central Asia, all the way up until maybe the Turkic invasions, was not necessarily white, but it was Indo-European. Now it's just Turkic.
I disagree. I don't think that the so-called Indo-Europeans were an ethnic group at all that spread to the supposed place.
They were a language group.
Sorry?
They were a language group. But the Central Asians were Iranians who are
I don't see how that could be true. I mean, the Iranian phenotype, evolved in Iran.
I meant
as you go
hold on. Sarmatians,
the Sarmatians weren't in Central Asia. They were in Eastern Europe.
What am I thinking of? The Scythians?
Scythians. Again, they were like in Europe. They weren't like,
Scythians, actually, if you look at the range.
They got as far as sort of Crimea. The Asian populations that we see in Siberia and in sort of Eastern Europe today, the Tartars and the Cumans and the Pechenegs and all of those, they sort of migrated, you know, during history, not during prehistory.
Here we go. Here's what
we go into the specifics, but like that's the relevant, you know.
Here's what it'll look like. Did you get the message in Hangout?
Oh yeah, yep, I got it here. Sarmatia. All right, yeah, Scythian does go pretty far, and it sort of borders on the Turkic, you know, tribes there.
Well, Kazakhstan
but that's still not, you know, that's
not
still
like
not Central
Turkmenistan
Asia
or whatever. It's not like right next to Iran. That would be more like the Bactrians and Indo-Scythians, all that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We call those the Indo-Scythians.
Well, they did actually invade India at a point and establish like some kingdom. I think it was called the Kushans. The Kushans. The funny thing, there were two empires, I think, which were called Kushans, but neither of them smoked Kush.
Nice.
Maybe they smoked cats.
Possibly.
Well, Afghanistan actually has a large amount of weed and all that being grown there.
Yeah, lots of opium as well. But anyway, yeah. So the this sort of Indo-Scythian, you know, that's not encompassing all of modern day Iran, and the Parthian Empire sort of, you know, cuts into Iran as well. Basically, is Iran, you know.
I think the Safavids are what should be Iran's borders.
Right. Well, you know, basically you have this Southwest Asian population, this like indigenous sort of Iranian population, right? And this is the phenotype that would have created the Parthian and Persian civilizations. Their admixture is like along the eastern seaboard of Greece and southern, along the southern coast of Italy, and, you know, obviously in Sicily, and in Greece, right, and all over sort of the Mediterranean islands. But of course, you know, 17% of the British prehistoric admixture is Southwest Asian in and of itself. So yeah, this group had relatively swarthy skin, right, like olive skin, but light eyes, right, as a phenotype, and the other group was the Meds, right? And this Mediterranean, they can break it down into like 7 other groups. So like Spanish Meds, like are you know, sort of this Med group was all around the Mediterranean, which is why they call it that. It's not like, you know, it's not just saying like the modern day Spanish, Italians, and Greeks. It also included like Egypt, for instance, was this same subracial type, you know. So, you know, it's quite interesting. Of course, Egypt obviously had the admixture from, you know,
Africa
as well. But this is what you would have seen. You would have seen sort of, yes, the whole Middle East being blacked up meme. It's a real thing, because you have these sort of ancestral populations. You can actually look at it as like a gradual decline from Neanderthals, if you want to. So like Neanderthals lived in all of these areas sort of east and north of Israel, you know, or Spain. They get sort of watered down. They make these hybrid populations, and then those hybrid populations then move into more and more northern climates, you know. But yes, it makes perfect sense that you know, these civilizations should be the ones to flourish at the times where they do. You know, because if you're looking at something like, if you start to look at something like smart faction theory, right? What smart faction theory is the idea that you need a certain number of people in your population, you know, a particular fraction, who are above a particular IQ to feel like the full effects of that, you know, or like great societies are made by societies with a smart fraction ratio of X, you know. Well, you know, someone who's interested in sort of someone who's thinking along those sorts of lines, I think, would then have to say, right, well, is IQ always a benefit, and will it have always been a benefit in other kinds of societies, and and once you go into other traits, it just, I think this pattern begins to emerge, whereby, you see this sort of mass creation in the southeast, that sort of moves up to the northwest. And it seems to make perfect sense to me that as societies progress, you will need a more intelligent population. As technological complexity increases, you will need a more intelligent, more introverted population. You maybe don't need a population that's quite as sociable as like a big prerequisite, things like this. And, conceptual issues become much, much more tricky. So I would say that, it makes perfect sense that the Kingdom of Uruk was in Uruk, and not in Britain. And it makes perfect sense that the British Empire was in Britain and not in Uruk, because those skills are sort of specialized to that time period. So back in the day of the Roman Empire, you would have needed a more sort of Roman population to be at the empire's zenith. And of course, it sort of varies from point to point, and you could say, oh, look, at this point, the French defeat the Spanish, and therefore your theory can't be right. No, it's a general trend, and one shouldn't expect, just because the population is like suited based on its genetics to the time period and the level of technology, etc., that they should necessarily win everything, But we should expect them to have a greater chance of doing so. So I think that sort of outlines my look on it, and it's not to say that way back in time they were more white and therefore more intelligent, and that's and they would have IQs of East Asia. This doesn't, it seems more like a Just So story, frankly. Whereas if you look at sort of the consistent traits created by these populations' environments, it makes far more sense that they would just be specialized to the particular period in which they thrived. And we do see it as well. It goes right from the southeast right up to the northwest.
Of what?
Well, so it starts out in Uruk and ends up in Britain, So it always goes to the north and to the west, So it goes, from, you might say it goes from sort of Uruk to, or you might even say, you sort of include Egypt, sort of depend. But, you could say from Uruk to, the Hittites, to the Mycenaeans, to like the Romans, to, or, from the Mycenaeans to like other Greeks, because there was that big Bronze Age collapse.
And then you got the, my favorite part of history, the early modern era. So you got the Timurids, then the Aquanlu Federation, Turk Black Sheep Turkmen.
What are you talking about?
I'll show you what these people are. We're talking about Iraq, right?
What?
We're talking. You mentioned Uruk. We're talking about Iraq, right?
No. Uruk is just it's just Sumeria. It's just the cradle of civilization, the Kingdom of Uruk, Gilgamesh's kingdom. But yeah, do you see how it sort of goes? From the southeast to the northwest.
Oh right. So civilization's moving as people who are smarter are pushed up north, or maybe not pushed, but the people who happen to be smarter are up north, because the people from down south got dumber.
No. It's that the people down south, we can, and yes, their biology will have changed, but whether or not it will have changed substantially, there's sort of little data on that one way or the other. But the point is, we can expect, based on environmental adaptivity, creating, sort of prerequisite predetermined, to an extent, sort of predetermined character based on genetics. We can infer from that that, and given the fact that, you know, as you go from the southwest up to the northeast, you know, as you do that, all of these traits differ, and at the same time, sort of the period in which this group, you know, was at its zenith, if you like, you know, that sort of moves at the same. Do you get what I mean? It's the same spectrum. It's the same pattern.
Yeah, migration, I guess.
No, not migration. You don't seem to understand.
I had no idea what you were talking about. I wasn't paying attention.
Well, pay attention, man. Okay, so you have, right, this. You have, you know, a spectrum of populations, right, from southwest, right, which is like, you know, Persia sort of area, to sorry, from the southeast to the northwest, which is sort of British Isles area, you know, Northern Europe, Northwest Europe. Okay, I'll put it like this. There are traits from east to west. Most importantly, as one goes west in Europe, people become more creative and empathetic. And as one goes north, populations become more introverted and intelligent, with higher numbers of genii per capita. What Professor Hemleth Nyborg dubs the northern ecotype, or ecological type, which is what I call it, a thermotype. You know, but basically, you know, so you have...
I see. So you're talking about traits, personality, civilization traits as you move across the map of Europe, Middle East, Africa.
Exactly. It's one spectrum. So, you know, the northern thermotype is therefore able to reach a threshold for like smart faction theory and things like that. But like more than that, you know, it's the confluence of Northern European traits together that seem to confer this great advantage in our respective societies, this common character. The latter point is entirely predictable based on Bergman's rule that animals in colder climates need to generate more heat, so they need to be larger in order to generate that extra heat, and therefore need a bigger brain as a result of the subsequent selection in cold Northern Europe, you know, where our unique genetic admixture and the climate's adaptation has created a unique people. So, you know, as societies develop and as technological complexity increases, it becomes more necessary to be more creative, intelligent, introverted, with high time preference and lower degrees of sociability, lethargy and genetic nepotism. And governance by personal loyalty is deferred to governance by preferential ideal, governance by preferred concept, you know. And this is the Northern European tradition that we have, that we are willing to put our faith in an idea, you know, and then only we're willing to...
Yeah.
Well, no, rather than putting your faith in a man based on personal loyalty.
Oh, right. So
which is how they operate in Italy.
Yeah, like in the Middle East, like, you know, dictators or, you know, monarch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they sort of operate through personal loyalty to themselves.
The average MAGA-P in the United States probably, in that sense, is like someone in the Middle East, putting too much faith in the one man.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. This is not something I ever would have expected to have seen from, you know, somewhere like America with its Anglo character, but we've seen it nonetheless. Probably all the Slavs you guys are bringing in.
You just can't do shit. That's the issue.
Yeah, well, the problem is you haven't put your faith in an idea. So, like, what are you expecting from him? You know, he's just said, "Oh, I'm gonna do X. You know, I'm going to do Y." You know, we have campaign promises, and like everyone knows, you know, take that with a punch of salt. But like, he never said like, "I am a you know, a paleo conservative with libertarian, you know, X leanings, and I believe this on this policy because of this principle." He was very sort of common sense, not dealing with priors, just going straight to the policies, straight to the points. And like, it's just
weird.
It's weird, and it's not something that you would expect to see, because they're putting too much faith in a man and a figure.
Yeah, they're not focusing on this position.
Yeah, it's what Oswald Spengler calls Caesareanism, or Caesarism.
God was the first of the Gracchi. Legends say that Bernie Sanders will be the next one, but he'll be the actual commie one, and he'll ruin the world. If that Jew, if that person gets elected, he'll be basically the left-wing version of Trump, and its first 2 years will be hell. In the sense
nice. A Trump on the left as well. Yes, nice.
Trump and Sanders are basically the Gracchi of
No, I know what you were saying. You were saying that he's going to be Caesarist in the same way, right?
Yeah. And then you're eventually going to get some figure later down the road who will probably be in the military and institute a coup. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a civil war. That's never going to happen. If there is a civil war, it'll be a military coup.
Okay.
Spain.
Yeah, like Franco.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk sort of preferred policy then. Let's take it back home to the United States, because what I tend to do at the moment a lot is because I'm writing sort of the template for the sort of the preferred government system in the UK, and sort of helping chaps across Northern Europe, other like-minded people. Let's troubleshoot America, right? So like, how do you reform the United States? Say you have achieved a majority, and you're about to reform your constitution. You're about to add amendments, take them away. I don't know. What would you do? Would governors be hereditary? You sort of bring that natural order into it, or
hereditary. I don't think the United States has the culture, the DNA to do that.
What are you talking about? You got the Bush dynasty, basically.
But
Kennedy dynasty,
I know, but I don't think if you were to be like this leader serves for life, dies, then his relative becomes the next leader. I don't think that's gonna go too well. And plus, people voted for Trump because they didn't like Bush. They didn't want another Bush.
Yeah, exactly. It's because the job of quote unquote could you I can hear myself, it's echoing.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if the audience can hear that or not, but yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the idea, dynasty did its job, if you like, right? Because people knew not to vote for Bush because he was a Bush, right? People knew not to vote for Clinton because she was a Clinton.
More like because she was an evil witch.
I mean, she literally is Satan. But like, do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
it's done its job. People knew to vote. The Kennedys were a safe vote, and so they voted for them. They knew they were a safe bet because they're in the public sphere, and they all it's sort of the idea that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, and this is particularly true with the Bushes, where it was basically
George Bush in particular wasn't the intelligent one. He isn't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Jeb's the smart brother for sure, but he's got no support anymore. But he was basically carrying on the Bush dynasty. He was carrying on the Bush administration, right? He had all the same advisors. He was going to appoint all of the same public officials, etc.
And I'd say in terms of like people when they elected Bush and Bush Jr., not Bush Sr., they were interested. They called him like Little Bush, but they kind of a neutral opinion of him. And then when 9/11 happened, his approval rating went up to like 80-90%. Like, how do you get that? Imagine if we're so polarized now that imagine if we had a terrorist attack where 3,000 people were killed. Trump's approval rating, if he responded to it efficiently or in a way the public wanted, wouldn't even go up like 1%.
Yeah.
But it went up to 90%, then it slowly declined, and then by like the mid to late 2000s, it was in the 20s.
Yeah, that's very low.
At the moment, the Donald, he has an average of about 44.4%, which is the highest it's been since I think either February or March of last year.
But the problem is then, how do you remove corrupt? How do you fix the political system then?
You need to see. I think the issue is that you can't pass a bill without 60 votes. I think you should be able to pass it with less, maybe 55 or something. A 55 majority.
I don't think that's going to solve anything.
And if someone filibusters, then you can have a vote on whether the vote should take place. Or, you can have a debate, but make it the majority you need to get things passed.
Any of this is going to fix anything. The ability to pass bills is not the problem. It's one of it.
Like, why can't Trump get anything done?
It's certainly a problem. Well, I mean, arguably then, you're sort of making a plebiscite argument while saying, we ought not to ever, sort of operate as a plebiscite. But it seems to me like what you're looking for is just more executive authority for the president to be able to see through his promises.
Like, I think the president should have, first of all, the ability to make bills. He can't sign them, but he should have the ability to introduce them.
But he can just get one of his lackeys to do it.
No, but if he does that, then, it won't be what he wants. Like, the omnibus spending bill, which was like a 1.3 trillion, which was a terrible bill. The reason why he signed it was because they rushed it at the very last minute and they didn't have anything he wanted in it. He didn't want to cause a government shutdown. So if Trump was able to, let's say, introduce a bill and get the House to vote on it, then I think that would be a bit more efficient than making Congress do it. Because Congress, quite frankly, is the most lazy, awful.
This is barely attesting to, you're saying the problem with the Trump, and we're assuming that the Trump administration is going to make the country better. I don't think it would. But let's just assume that this is correct. Your whole sort of what's wrong with the governmental structure is we need parties to be able to get bills through with a small majority. So that would easily backfire in the next election. So this isn't really, as far as I can see, this is sort of, not doing anything to solve,
and thus give more executive authority to the president.
Right, but I don't see that as doing anything to fix your government structure.
Or what you could do is you could have give less power to the judges, I think.
And less power to the judges.
Like, for example, the judges are probably the bane of any president's existence, because when Obama was elected, the judges didn't do anything, but now when Trump got elected, every single executive order he passed, they just struck it down. And I think just centralizing the power and with one man would be a better solution.
Why? Okay, so you're looking for an absolute dictator, an elected dictator.
Not an absolute dictator, but just give more power to the president. And I don't know.
Right.
That's my whole issue.
So why waste time with,
Well, also make states' rights a thing, where if a state doesn't like that law, they can annul it.
Right. So the president would have all of this great power to pass all of these new bills, and then any state could just strike it down anyway. So in fact,
they could not follow it, but they wouldn't strike it down.
No, but every state could not follow it.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen. Let's say I move to Wyoming. I think it would be, if the president had a lot more power, Wyoming would be not do anything about it. They're the deepest red state besides maybe, I don't know, Mississippi. whatever. So I think if there's the chances of all states trying to annul a bill are zero, and we would just see more people move to I don't know, maybe Texas or Nebraska or places like that.
Why?
Or I certainly would move there. Racially conscious people would move there. Maybe not Texas, but white majority states which would have it's basically centralized power plus states' rights.
Right. But what are you going to do to solve the failings of your government? How are you going to solve corruption? The obvious problem in
Make it so that everyone in every position serves a 1-year term and they can get reappointed, but it has to be done. But if someone protests, they can't get appointed again. Or like, let's say a large majority of people protest and don't like it. As if one person protests, that will backfire. But you get the idea.
Not really.
Or just make it so that people in the cabinet get.
So you're suggesting, but I mean, you say 1-year term, but then like they then get reselected almost automatically, it seems.
Or like they have a term limit of maybe 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, originally, of course, the president I think he has a 2-term limit, right?
Yeah, usually the president would just choose to not. It wasn't until FDR where the Republicans wanted, when they had control of the House and Senate, they passed a legislation to pass the bill which would limit the presidency to 2 terms.
Right.
But it used to be that as a sign of like dignity or a sign of like respect, you wouldn't serve more than 2 terms, but you weren't forced to.
Yeah. But okay, so
really, I just think the United States, there may not be a solution to it. We're gonna become more like the lay 56% meme in the coming years. I mean, even with the many decades of England or the United Kingdom and immigration, they're still like 85% white or like 80% white.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to what you would do to sort of solve this issue of corruption. Right.
First of all, I'd make it so that public officials, not the president, but maybe congressional leaders, could be murdered without penalty.
What?
If we were to keep the same system, I think popular people probably wouldn't be murdered.
What? So you'd only need one person? that frankly is absurd.
They could hire bodyguards, but let's say the bodyguards turn on them. Like universally hated people who are stuck in Congress could just be killed.
Why?
Why not? I just think there isn't a solution to the United States. You need to come up with something absurd to solve it.
Hold on, you can't prove a negative.
We're fine. Then term limits. Term limits. So. You can't serve more than 12 years in the House or Senate. You can't, once you move on to the House, you can't move on to the Senate, or vice versa. You think term limits would help?
No, of course not. That's worse. That's palpably worse.
There are people who've served in the House or House of Representatives since like the 70s or 60s. I don't think. First of all, they're getting a bit old, and I don't think they just vote on party lines, and they don't really vote on principle because they're getting old, not cognitively working.
The problem is that they're put in power, with sort of no regard for what they'll do once they're there. It's sort of, we have this idea that they're sort of there to represent the will of the people, and so they'll do it, right? Because we have to vote on them, right? No, of course not. If you're in a job for a temporary period of time, you're going to sort of suck everything you can out of it before the unforgiving
campaign donations.
Hold on. Before the unforgiving public, inevitably kick you out. you can't pass it on to your son. There's sort of no point of holding on to it, you know, until your death anyway. It's better just to milk it for everything you can, get all the bribes, all the payouts, all the campaign financing, etc., into your slush funds that you can. That's the problem. It's a basic problem with representative democracy, like a basic problem that's like, just, you know, sort of instinctively, you know, intuitively, you can just sort of, you know, people when you explain it, like they get it, but then it's like, but then what? Like, you know, that what's the solution to that, right? That's it's such a basic problem, and it's something that all societies suffer from. You know, the more
fascism.
Hmm?
Then fascism.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, under fascism, you've sort of got a lot of the same problems. I mean, it's like, you know, you were saying before, like, you know, have this politician have a 2-term limit, so he'll be in office for an even shorter period of time, so he'll fuck up.
I meant for Congress, not politician, not for leader.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. You know, it's
and give.
But hold on.
Revolution.
Hold on. Once you have a revolution, you need to come up with this. You know, you need to come up with a system that will work. And so, like, you know, you're back at square one again. But like you pointed out, like, oh, you know, some people can reappoint the guy after his term, and if not, you know, some people can protest. And it's like this is sort of exactly the way that, you know, policy is written, you know. So I can see where you're thinking in these terms. It's not a, you know, it's not sort of not that the stupidity is on you. It's that this is what I hear, you know.
This is the Overton window. This is all. You don't have that many sources of outside information to come up with an opinion.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's the Overton window. But like this is a, you know, it's a basic problem. Like what system, right? What factors, what pressures on the people doing the reappointing exist? Because if it's none, then you're just passing the buck and saying, oh, some man will decide. Like, oh, it's okay, everyone, we can go home. A man's deciding it. Like, you know, and this is what I feel like with modern government. You know, it's like, oh, if you need something really, if you need like an inquiry to be really impartial, something to be above reproach, you know, you get maybe a backbench MP to, you know, who doesn't toe the party line particularly. You might get him to chair the inquiry because, of course, he's a politician. He has this democratic accountability. You know, they think in these sorts of terms. But then when you realize, like, there's no such thing as democratic accountability, and the representative.
I mean, if Hillary can get the nomination, there is no such thing.
Yeah, but like once they realize that, like, representative democracy is in fact corruption, you know, the one stems from the other. They are in fact, you know,
the god that failed.
Well, I you know, broadly agree with Hoff. I disagree with his particulars of like an absolute monarchy. I think that's silly. And also, like, you know, it doesn't really make sense. He doesn't go into sort of into very much detail into like what kind of a structure like the United States would have to be. Like you want an absolute dictator, a hereditary dictator who just owns the country lock, stock and barrel, and hope that, you know, he does all the things that you would expect. Why not just, you know, write a body of law that you can't overturn and force him to... Yeah, I don't get that either. You know, there's a long tradition of like monarchs following the Constitution, you know.
Yeah, I really don't get when you see conservatives who are like, hey, if this law was terrible, but they passed it the constitutional method, I would support it, or I would be fine with it.
Oh, that's stupid. That's like saying, I don't care whether or not we go to the horse races or to the football game. I'm just concerned that whether or not we take the train or the bus. It's like no one thinks that. That's stupid.
Yeah, that's the problem with maybe not principles, but with boomers, I think, or you know what I mean by people who are like, just gotta follow the Constitution, my Constitution. You know, the Markle-Vins of the world.
Yeah. Constitutionalism.
I think that certain amendments should not be overturned. I think, like, you know.
Well, do you know what the meme really is? It's an implicit assumption, right? It's like Constitution, implicit assumption being the Constitution is like axiomatically good, you know. When there
I
are
mean,
plenty
some of
of
the
bad things
amendments
that could
I'm
be in a
glad exist.
constitution.
Some of the amendments I'm glad exist, like, you know, right to bear arms, because otherwise we'd probably be in the same situation as Europe, or like you can't to defend yourself as a crime.
It literally is, but like, you know, that's not really the same thing.
I think the Bill of Rights, for example, should not be allowed to be regulated.
The 1643 Bill of Rights.
No, the 10 Bill of Rights.
10 Bill of Rights?
You know, free assembly. Or, you know, right to bear arms.
Okay.
Now, I don't think people should own like nukes or anything, or should be able to, you know, own a fighter plane. But if just general owning guns, being able to say something about, you know, being arrested for saying mean things on the internet, that sort of thing should not be allowed to be regulated. Like, introduce a bill saying the basic fundamental rights which we enshrine in our Constitution, they can't be regulated. But then that will be regulated. That's the issue. It's like expecting government to play by its own rules.
No, I see what you're saying, and like I'm glad to see you sort of thinking along these lines. But I just, you know, I can't help but feel, you know, even in very patrician republics like Rome and Venice, right? They didn't really have the system account for the society in the way that we're sort of looking for. They have a society that creates a system, and that society is what the Italians call it "amici di amici." It's you know, friends of friends. It's the governance by personal loyalty, and this is where democracy comes from. You know, this is where you know, this is.
It's the roots.
It's the kind of, yeah, it's the Mediterranean attitude. You know, it's the Mediterranean character, part politicized. So is like syndicalism and these other sorts of, you know. So basically, if you want a republic, or if you want representative democracy, expect corruption and build a society in which like it's good. And you would basically just have to like copy Italian society. And I'm not even sure if that's even possible from a Northern European.
In the United States. I mean, we're the United States. Maybe in a place like, I don't know, Manhattan, where you have a large Italian population.
Yeah, but I mean, the country as a whole, I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's the country's so big, and there's so many rural parts of it that it's kind of hard to model yourself off a European country, which is somewhat like Montana, for example. That alone is like, I think, 3 times the size of Italy.
Yeah, I mean, Italy is a relatively small country. Lots of
it's double or triple the size of France.
Yeah, lots of urban areas, though. And, you know, it's on a smaller scale. You know what you could do with America. There's nothing wrong with that comparison, I don't think. There's lots of rural areas. You know, this kind of we should come up with a word for it, frankly. But this Mediterranean system, let's call it that. That's better at you know, operating in organic way and standing up for the rights of like rural communities, because you have a patron. You know, these rural communities will have a patron that they are loyal to, and he will push through like policies which, you know, are sort of good for his what do you call it, his benefactors, you know. Or
I know, like the idea that
beneficiaries. Sorry.
Yeah, I know, like the idea that politicians don't really have any responsibility for their what do you call it, their constituents, while, you know, a monarch or like a father figure does.
Yeah, and that's why you have to resort to things like, oh, you know, I can see the sort of logic around it, although, you know, I'd never support something like that, but. The idea of, you know, killing corrupt or universally hated politicians or something, I think that's abhorrent. But I don't think that would make a particularly good political system, or a very good policy. But I can see the kind of line of thinking when it comes to, you know, if you want something barbarous like democracy, then you need to resort to barbarous means. You can expect to see, you know, and I think Trump in a way is kind of like a Berlusconi in his own right.
The Italian dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Who said called someone, I think, an unfuckable land whale.
Yeah. He's a total lad, total don. But yeah, no, he's sort of the Berlusconi of America, I would say.
I'd say more like the Matteo Salvini.
Trump is very sort of familial, you know, in the way that he runs his companies and that sort of thing, and also, you know, Trump is very well, frankly, he's just an American version of Berlusconi. You know, he's had several wives. His, you know, current wife is very young compared to him, and I think she was a model or something. And she speaks terrible English. You know, it's just a walking stereotype.
Yeah. I think I have to go soon, like do some shit. So, do you think we should end it here?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good place to end it.
All right.
I hope next time we can talk about a little bit of current affairs. That's always fun doing that.
Yeah.
With you.
Maybe the Irish and maybe Swedish election.
Oh yes, of course. We'll go through those. And also, I think I'll be starting up the Forum Albion podcast. Yeah.
Finally, you've been inactive for months. I expect something from you.
Yeah. Okay, this was fun. Thank you everyone for watching. It's always a pleasure, never a chore.